It was at this point during the afternoon that things took a slight turn for the worse, but not as bad as they could have been. The bike competition had been fierce all afternoon and getting fiercer as time was running out. Late in the day, this pair came up to run, and for the bulk of the run, everything went perfectly well. You see the bike hooking out towards the centre line, really getting on some power, and now as he starts to slow down, smoke from the engine as it lets go, that's enough to throw the bike out of control and lose control completely. Well, that looked shocking enough, but in fact, the rider was totally unscathed by the incident. Somehow in that tangle of motorcycle and man, they missed each other, and the worst that happened was that the rider took a tumble and a roll along the tarmac. We've seen it happen often enough in circuit racing. The protective clothing, the leathers and the helmet did everything that they were supposed to do, and though the safety crews rolled at once, they were not needed at the top end of the strip because the rider actually walked away from this one. Look at him now in slow motion, really hooking out towards the centre line. The race is in the bag, he's won. Now he shuts off the engine, and that's when it lets go. That locks up the back wheel, look at the smoke from it, and that's enough to throw it out of control. He does his best to hold it down, but with that long tail wagging away, there's nothing he can do except chuck it away and hope that it goes the other way. Fortunately it does. And although he's taken a bit of a bouncing on the tarmac, and though the bike has taken more than a bit of a bouncing, the rider's unhurt, and that's more than you can say for the motorbike. Back into competition, this is Phil Brachvogel and the Corner Scorcher, the Nitro burner, running 7 seconds under normal conditions, and Phil launching into a very, very long burnout, announces his intention of getting down into the sevens even on an afternoon like this. You'll see the green light come on the tree when it's time for him to leave the line. And you saw his arm move there on the amber. A good drag racer always floors the throttle on the amber. If you see the green, you've lost. Well, no problems for Phil Brachvogel and the Corner Scorcher. We go back to Pro Drag. This is an alcohol funny car. And we had a massive contingent from Sweden, from Norway, from France, from Germany. Most of the alcohol cars are Scandinavian though, immaculately prepared and really representing the leading edge of technology. For the British racer, somehow the alcohol dragsters seem to have the greater attraction, and the British teams have never been very successful with alcohol funny cars. Nevertheless, they provide an enormous focus of interest in Scandinavia and in England too when they come over, and no wonder when they handle like this. Slightly out of shape off the start line, backing right off out of it, and that's the race wrapped up for the other driver. With all that said though, things didn't go too well for Great Britain in alcohol dragster either. There goes Peter Lance, scorching away off the start line. His race won in the first 50 yards. Waiting at the start line though was Britain's great white hope, the Le Patron team. Steve Reed at the controls of the dragster in the left-hand lane. Against him, the funny car, once raced in Top Fuel funny car in America by Ed McCullough, now running alcohol funny car in Sweden and here at Sandepop for the World Finals. And look at how little traction there is down there, getting out of shape in the burnout and not even able to light the tyres up. Now that's going to be a problem later on. No problems though for Steve Reed. This beautiful new car which the Reed Speed team brought out at the beginning of the 1988 season. Coming up to the line, there goes the green, there goes Steve Reed, and look at the funny car, out of shape on the line, and Steve Reed gone. That's him all the way up the quarter mile, no mistakes and no wobbles for him. The funny car proving that they are just as much a handful in alcohol as in Top Fuel. This time it's all Scandinavia. Bjorn Ardeen in the funny car races Krista Johansson, who used to be the man in alcohol dragster. After 2 seasons away from it though, he's working hard to re-establish his position at the top of the tree. And this time it isn't working, neither is his engine. A puff of smoke, let's go half strip, and Bjorn Ardeen races on to another round. As the afternoon wears on, more and more cars come out to race, more and more classes getting their crack at the quarter mile. Tim Cook with the 55 Chevy and Vivica Erstad with the Phillips Ford Pop. Running in competition altered, and another group of cars destined not to make the final by the close of the afternoon. Bob Batten also running competition altered with the Black Mass V8 powered Marina. He'll be able to come back again in November, which you can't say for the Scandinavian competitors. So everybody running through as quickly as they can, cutting down their time on the start line, shorter burnouts, less time coming up to the line, quicker off the end of the strip, trying to get as many rounds of eliminations through as possible before the weather closed in. This is Mick Gledo in the time machine racing the Marina, and there goes Bob Batten picking up those front wheels again. Cost him at least half a second on the start line. Mick Gledo coming on strong at the top end, but Bob Batten just making it through to the next round of competition. Riders, drivers and race officials did their very, very best to get the Euro series of bikes completed by the end of the afternoon, and despite their efforts, it was not to be. Once again in Funny Bike, we saw the Rice Burner, this state-of-the-art machine carrying its front wheel all the way up the quarter mile, being steered on the back wheel and running on towards a place in the record books. But though things were going very well for the Nash family, not everything went too well for all the competitors, and even the best prepared machine needs a helping hand from time to time. On what can only be described as a very, very tricky surface indeed, the big cars came out late in the afternoon. This is John Spuffard in the showdown car. Going into the burnout, watch those rear wheels grow, and here is John Niedervos in the Wins Purple Power Corvette, also going through a very, very tough burnout. These cars need all the help they can get now. The surface is still cold, damp, there's some oil down there, and they need as much traction as the burnout can generate. Very carefully reversing back in the tram lines left during the burnout, those 2 long strips of rubber laid down by the rear wheels, and an extra generous helping of grip juice before they come up to the start line for their run. John Spuffard with the best launch, gone up the quarter mile, and John Niedervos with problems there on the start line, left behind on the green light. No mistake for John Spuffard though, a perfect afternoon's racing for him. Now though, it's time for the Top Fuel final, the first time ever in British drag racing history that 2 women, Liv Bjerstad here and Monica Öberg here, have ever met in a Top Fuel final. Liv Bjerstad, the newcomer to the sport, with the state-of-the-art car which was fielded by Joe Amato in the 1987 NHRA season, racing Monica Öberg's slightly older but nonetheless competitive Bosch-sponsored Dragster. Conditions very, very tricky indeed. The Top Fuel Dragster's slightly easier to control than the funny cars thanks to their longer chassis. And as the 2 cars pass side by side, you can see the taller, wider rear wing that became fashionable later on. That's on this car, fielded by Liv Bjerstad, with Runa Fjeld, the crew chief, alongside, making sure that everything's going according to plan. Monica Öberg also reversing back into her rubber marks. Grip juice down under the rear tyres for both cars, and they chirp the wheels, spreading the juice evenly over the surface of the rubber. And look again at the horsepower this car develops. Certainly a handful, and it's going to be a problem for Liv Bjerstad, as it will be for Monica Öberg. Will they get the traction they need for the vital launch? As they come up to the line in a second or 2, we'll find out the answer. Monica Öberg already in stage. Liv Bjerstad moves into stage. Both drivers go up in smoke. Liv Bjerstad very sensibly comes off it. Monica Öberg stays with it, keeps on the throttle and goes all the way through to take the win. In normal circumstances, you'd say when the back wheels go up in smoke, come off the throttle, the race is over and you have lost. Monica Erberg, though, the more experienced driver, knew that the car alongside her was in the same problems. She was the one who stayed on the throttle and the risk paid off. Watch it happen. Liv Bjerstad sees what's happened. She comes off the throttle and Monica Erberg stays on it. Look at her, a long half-track burnout. That's 220 yards of smoke and flame. Eventually it hooks up in the last few yards and she takes a fine and very convincing win in Top Fuel. Officially out of competition, but here to give the paying spectators at least some recompense for the appalling weather they've suffered this weekend. Ludwig Bjornstad taking a smoky but effective win over Pelle Lindelow. And the funny car final. Gary Page in the Showtime Trans Am and Harlan Thompson in the Budweiser Trans Am. Both of these cars represent the pinnacle of European funny car racing. In body, in paint and in engine, their drivers are the best that you could hope to find on the European circuit, and this promises to be a very exciting race. Everybody's on tiptoe in the grandstands. Look at the crowd leaning forward over that barrier. This is the race of the afternoon, the one they have been waiting for, but conditions do not favour hard racing. Will the drivers give them a run for their money? With Gary Page and Harlan Thompson, it's almost a certainty. They come up to the staging beams now. They take their time, edging it in, and there they go, side by side off the line. And look at Harlan Thompson going out of shape. Harlan Thompson stays on the throttle. He's all over the track. Gary Page is gone. A record-breaking run for him. 5.89 seconds to take a fantastic win over Harlan Thompson. Well, that truly was the high spot of the afternoon, or at least one of them. Harlan Thompson staying on the throttle for so long that we all thought he was going to kiss the guardrail. Very unusual for him, but he knew what the spectators had expected, and he certainly gave them value for money and showed his tremendous prowess as a driver. Also putting on a tremendous show in the latter part of the afternoon were the pro stock racers, mostly Scandinavian, a few British competitors to give the spectators something to cheer on, Jeff Hauser and Graham Bars notably, and racing very, very closely indeed. Slippery conditions are as much of a problem for these cars as they are for the funny cars and for the Top Fuel dragsters. Nevertheless, we saw some very tight and some very intense racing. But the afternoon was drawing to a close. The light was fading, the track was getting slippery, and there was moisture in the atmosphere. It didn't rain again, but there was water in the air and on the track surface. This late afternoon burst of sunshine was about the best weather that we saw all weekend at the World Finals. And that was very much the story of the 1988 race season. The cannonball rained off. We had a fine weekend at the Sun Summer Nationals and began the World Finals in a downpour and ended it in the dark. Nevertheless, 1988 was packed with close and intense racing. We saw more personal bests, more class records and more European records established during this single season than in any other single season of drag racing at Santa Pod. The year wasn't without its upsets, of course, but it was a very memorable year nonetheless. High points have to be Gary Page and that tremendous 5.89 second blast at the World Finals. Graham Nash riding his funny bike into the history books as the fastest funny bike in Europe. Pro Stock Racing 2 provided some very, very spectacular action. A full field of Pro Stockers running at Santa Pod for the very first time, and Jeff Hauser running very, very competitively, taking his Sierra Cosworth tantalisingly close to the 7-second bracket and becoming the first British door slammer to break into the 7-second zone. He missed it by just fractions of a second. 1989, though, looks sure to be the year when he breaks into 7 seconds. Look at the strength of this car in the burnout. Running against 500 cubic inch engines from Scandinavia. Jeff with his 440 Chrysler engine in the Sierra Cosworth, really up against it, outgunned in every sense of the word, but acquitted himself more than admirably and had the grandstands on their feet cheering on more than one occasion. And so the 1988 season ended on a high note, despite the appalling weather which had haunted the biggest meetings of the year. The racers acquitted themselves well in all classes, and once again, Great Britain had shown the rest of Europe a clean pair of heels all the way up the standing quarter.